This is Contracts, Common Law Acceptance. I am Professor Scott DeVito. Let's begin. Learning objectives today are for you to have a deeper understanding of what it takes to accept an offer and for you to understand the basics of the Mailbox Rule. As you will recall, acceptance is a manifestation of assent to the terms of an offer and in the manner invited by the offer or in the manner required by the offer. So sometimes an offer tells you how you've got to accept the offer. If I say the only way you can accept my offer is via the phone, then your manifestation of assent must be to the terms of my offer, and it's got to be via the phone. You can't text me, you can't email me. You've got to do it in the manner I require. We'll talk more about manner invited in a few moments. So here's an example of acceptance. Pam, I will pay you $5,000 to design my new house. That creates power of acceptance in the offeree. She says, great, I will design your new house for $5,000. You've got acceptance. She manifested assent to the terms in the manner invited. He spoke it. She verbally replied to the terms and affirmation. Usually, when somebody makes an offer to you, you're going to have to notify them of your acceptance, meaning you're going to have to tell them somehow that you've accepted, transmit that information. Now, unless the offer makes it clear that you don't have to notify the offeree of your acceptance, you have to notify them. If you do have to notify the offeror of your acceptance, then when you accept, it must be unequivocal. Unequivocal means it has to be clear and definite. You have to say yes. You can't say, let me think about it, or I think so, or maybe. It has to be yes, no, clear. You can't sort of waffle on it. Although, if you make an equivocal acceptance and the offeror reasonably understands it as an acceptance, then it will be an acceptance. So if I say to you, I'll paint your house for $5,000, and you give me some sort of hedging answer to that, that sounds a lot reasonably like an acceptance, then I can accept your hedge as an acceptance, and now we've got a contract formed. And that can lead to all kinds of problems. You want to avoid putting equivocal acceptances. Be clear, be definite. If you're unclear or you leave it sort of as a waffle, you open the door to a lot of problems arising. Sometimes silence or inaction can also be a manifestation of acceptance. So if you look at Restatement Second of Contracts, it gives us three ways at Section 69.1 in which silence or inaction can be acceptance. So the first way is if an offeree takes the benefit of the offered services and the offeree had reasonable opportunity to reject them and the offeree had reason to know that they were offered with the expectation of compensation, then being silent will be a manifestation of acceptance. And when you read the restatements, what you'll notice is that there are comments explaining the restatements and illustrations. In this case, illustration 1 is a really useful way of understanding this. So A gives several lessons on the violin to B's child, intending to give the child a course of 20 lessons and to charge B the price. B never requested A to give this instruction, but silently allows the lessons to be continued to their end, having reason to know of A's intention. B is bound to pay the price of the course. So if you're silent in that circumstance, you're going to have created an acceptance by your silence. Second way is if an offeror has given the offeree reason to understand that assent may be manifested by silence or inaction, and the offeree is silent or fails to act with the intent to accept. So the danger is if you tell somebody they can accept by silence, if they're silent but they don't intend to accept, they haven't accepted. If they're silent and they intend to accept, then they've accepted. So if you look at illustrations 2 through 4, it makes a lot of sense. A offers by mail to sell to B a horse already in B's possession for $250, saying, I am so sure that you will accept that you need not trouble to write me. Your silence alone will operate as acceptance. B makes no reply, but he does not intend to accept. No contract. All right, that intention to accept is key there. The facts are the same as in illustration 2, and illustration 2 is this first one I've got here. B replies by return mail saying, I accept your offer. Well, then you've got a contract. The facts being as stated in illustration B2, B makes no reply, remains inactive with the intention of thereby expressing his acceptance. In that case, there is a contract. So you've got a contract there. So if you're silent and you intend by your silence to accept, you've accepted. The third way is if there were previous dealings and it's reasonable, as a result of those previous dealings, that the offeree would notify the offeror if he does not intend to accept. Illustration 6 makes this pretty clear. A has for years insured B's property against fire under annual policies. At the expiration of one policy, in accord with their usual practice, A sends B a renewal policy and a bill for the premium. B retains the policy, so the policy is in effect, so he's getting the benefit of the policy for 2 months, and then refuses to pay the premium on demand. B is liable for the premium accrued prior to his rejection, because there's these previous dealings where it would be reasonable that the offeree would notify the offeror if he didn't intend to accept. Not only may silence be a method of acceptance, but when you do accept and it's an unequivocal acceptance, the method you use to accept or the manner you use to accept must be correct. If the offer requires a place, time, or manner of acceptance, then the acceptance must be in that place, at that time, and in that manner. So if I say you have to accept in person at my house 5 p.m. Friday, then you've got to be at my house 5 p.m. Friday in person to accept the offer. Otherwise, you just make a counteroffer. You might accept what you think is accepting, but in reality, since you didn't accept the terms of the offer, you're likely to be having made a counteroffer. If an offer doesn't limit the medium by which you accept it, so in person, as opposed to via email, via text, via writing, then you have to use a reasonable medium. So if I say to you, you can accept my offer by Friday, well, how do you accept that? Well, you have to have a reasonable medium. Do you send it by the mails? Do you send it by text? Do you email? Do you call me on the phone? Do you come by in person? We decide if a medium is reasonable if you don't have reason to think it's not reasonable. So there's no reason you would think texting me would be unreasonable. If I say, hey, I don't have a phone, so the only way you can accept is by coming to see me in person, then trying to text me at my phone isn't going to work. So there's a couple of ways you can decide if a medium is reasonable. One of them, and remember, it's always important, if they've specified a medium, you have to use that specified medium. But if it's the medium used by the offeror, or it's a medium customarily used in transactions just like this. So if you normally use the phone, if people normally use the phone to accept these kinds of offers, using the phone, absent any other reason for knowing the phone is a bad way of doing it, will be a reasonable method for communicating your acceptance. Now, there are a special sequence of rules that relate to accepting an offer via the mails. This set of rules is called the Mailbox Rule, and I'm not going to go through it in extraordinary detail. We could talk about the history and all of this stuff about a case about wool being shipped and so forth. We're just going to keep it very simple here. The Mailbox Rule says if an offer provides for a method of acceptance in conflict with the Mailbox Rule, then the Mailbox Rule does not apply. So what does that mean? Well, the Mailbox Rule is talking about acceptance using the mails. So if I drop a letter in the mail, under the Mailbox Rule, that can be an acceptance. If my offer says you cannot accept via the mail, so for example, if I say the only way you can accept is in person, then the Mailbox Rule can't be used. Now this matters because the Mailbox Rule tells us when acceptance occurs. And we want to know when acceptance occurs because sometimes people revoke their offer and it's unclear whether the revocation occurred before the acceptance. And the Mailbox Rule is going to help us deal with that problem. If acceptance via the mail is okay, then acceptance is made upon dispatch if mailing is invited or permitted by the offer. If it does not mention a manner of acceptance, the manner is reasonable, and if it is properly dispatched. So let's sort of break that out. I say to you, hey, I'll paint your house for $3,000. And you say, let me think about it. And let's assume I haven't limited the way that you can accept that offer. And it's totally reasonable to send me a letter saying, hey, Scott, I accept your offer to paint my house for $3,000. So you put it in the mail. If you've put the proper address and the proper stamp on it, and it's permitted in this case, then the moment you drop it in the mailbox, acceptance has occurred. And I've got some slides after this that'll make it a little bit clearer with an example. It's got to be properly dispatched, meaning you've got to have the right number of stamps on it, you've got to send it to the right address, all of that. Now, sometimes students get confused and they think you can do anything through the mails, and the moment you drop it in the mail, it's effective. Well, that's not true. If things like revocation and rejection occur through the mails, it's only when you get them in your hands that they occur. And that's what subsection C is about. Let's go to the next set of slides to make this a little clearer. On Monday morning, Tommy says to Sally via the phone, Sally, will you babysit my kid brother this Friday for $7 an hour? Sally says, I'm not sure, let me think about it. Let's assume that acceptance via the mail is okay here. The next day, Tuesday afternoon, assume the offer is not lapsed, Sally writes a letter that says, Dear Tommy, I accept your offer to babysit your brother for $7 an hour this Friday. She signs it, and now she's going to go mail it. Notice she has not accepted yet. She's got this envelope. She's written her acceptance down. It's not been communicated to Tommy yet. She takes that envelope. She puts it in the mailbox. Boom! The minute it's in the mailbox, acceptance occurs. Let's rewind that just to make it clear. She hasn't put it in the mailbox yet. It hasn't been revoked. No problems with it yet. It's allowed to go through the mails. It flies through the air. Boom! It's in the mailbox. She's accepted the offer. Notice, Tommy hasn't gotten that offer yet, that acceptance yet, but Tommy is locked in now. If right now Tommy called her on the cell phone and said, I revoke my offer, it's too late. She's already accepted it via the mail. And let's look at a flow chart for this. So does the offer provide a method of acceptance in conflict with the mailbox rule? So does it say you must accept in person? If the answer to that is yes, then you're out of the mailbox rule. If the answer is no, then you're going to ask whether an option contract is at play. Don't worry about what that means right now. We will come back to that later when we talk about option contracts. If it's an option contract, you've got all kinds of problems. You can't use the mailbox rule with option contracts. And I'll explain what that means when we talk about option contracts. Let's imagine it's not an option contract. Did the offer state a manner or medium of acceptance? And since it's up here, allows us to do the mailbox rule. If it doesn't, then you've got to say, well, is the acceptance made in a reasonable manner? Is mailing it a reasonable manner? We know that the offeror hasn't refused to let us use mail, but that doesn't mean it's still reasonable to use the mail. Was acceptance made via the mail reasonable? If the answer is yes, the minute you drop it in the mailbox, you've got acceptance. Remember, it's proper dispatch, proper stamps, proper address. If the answer is that the acceptance was made in a manner that was not reasonable, in a medium that was not reasonable, imagine mailing this is not a reasonable way to respond, then acceptance is going to occur when the offeror receives the acceptance. Now let's imagine that the offer stated the medium of acceptance. In this case, since the mailbox rule is allowed, that must mean that it's saying you can accept via the mails. Then if you can and you've mailed it with proper dispatch, acceptance is immediate the moment you drop it in the mailbox. If the answer to that is no, then acceptance is going to be upon receipt. And that's the mailbox rule. If you walk through this, pretty much everything is covered here. And remember, it's the common law mailbox rule. This has been Contracts, Common Law Acceptance. I am Professor Scott DeVito. Thank you.